My wife left me in the rain 40 miles from home, said I was too weak to stop her. I watched her drive off with my money, my trust, and her new lover. She thought I'd beg. Instead, my bodyguard pulled up with everything I needed to destroy her. And I smiled. Her betrayal was planned, and so was my revenge. I remember the rain first, not the cold, not the sting of betrayal, but the rain. Heavy and relentless, it pounded the windshield as we drove down I-85 somewhere between Spartanburg and the outskirts of Greenville, South Carolina. I wasn't really keeping track. I just stared out the window, my mind somewhere else, watching the trees blur into streaks of green and gray. Tessa hadn't said a word for the last 20 minutes. That wasn't unusual. Silence had become a regular companion in our marriage, especially lately. She kept her hands tight on the steering wheel, her jaw clenched, her eyes fixed straight ahead, like the road itself had done her wrong. I didn't ask where we were going. I already knew it wasn't about the destination. We pulled off at an old truck stop, one of those half-forgotten places where the neon signs buzz weekly and the parking lot has more potholes than pavement. She killed the engine and sat there for a second, breathing heavy. Then, without looking at me, she muttered, "Get out." I turned to her, pretending to be confused. "Get out? What are you talking about? You heard me, Daniel. Get out of the car. I need space. You need space. We need time apart. You've been unbearable." I blinked slowly. The rain was louder now, pounding the roof like fists. I looked at the dashboard clock, 9:43 p.m. "This is how you're doing it?" I asked. She finally looked at me. There wasn't anger in her face, not even hate, just that smug calmness she wore when she thought she had the upper hand. "You've been controlling, paranoid, treating me like a criminal. I can't do it anymore. You need to think about your behavior. Maybe this will help." I could have argued, I could have played the victim or begged her to reconsider, but I didn't. I just reached for the door handle. "You sure about this?" I asked one last time. She didn't answer. I stepped out into the rain. The cold slammed into me like a wall. My shoes sank into a puddle. I turned back as she rolled down the passenger window. "You can call someone, right?" she asked. "You've got your phone dead," I said. She shrugged. "There's a diner inside. I'm sure they have a phone." "Goodbye, Daniel." The window slid up, the car pulled away, and just like that, I was alone. I stood there for a moment, the rain soaking through my jacket, my shirt down to the skin. The taillights disappeared into the mist, and I could hear the faint roar of trucks on the highway in the distance. A chill crept up my spine, not from the cold, but from how familiar this moment felt. Because I'd seen it before. I turned slowly and walked toward the diner. Neon lights buzzed above the door, flickering in a way that made the place feel like a set from a movie about people who'd lost their way. Inside it was warmer, but not by much. A few truckers sat hunched over their coffee, staring at a TV in the corner playing reruns of an old crime drama. No one looked up as I entered. I slid into a booth by the window facing the parking lot. The rain traced patterns on the glass. A waitress with tired eyes and a pen tucked behind her ear approached. "Coffee?" she asked. "Sure," I said. She poured it without asking anything else, then walked away. I wrapped my hands around the warm mug and stared out into the night. Tessa thought she'd broken me. That was the whole point of this, wasn't it? Not just to leave, but to humiliate me, to make sure I knew she was in control, that I was powerless, that she could toss me aside in the middle of nowhere and I'd crumble, but she didn't know, she never had. I reached into my jacket, pulled out the tiny flash drive I kept on me at all times, waterproof and sealed. It held everything. Every conversation she thought I didn't hear. Every financial transaction she tried to hide. Every call to Derek. Every plan they made whispered in rooms they thought were private. She didn't know I'd been watching, listening, preparing. 6 months ago, I started putting the pieces together. It started small. A late-night text from a number I didn't recognize. A transfer from our joint account that I didn't approve. At first, I thought I was imagining things. Maybe it was just stress. Maybe she really was just working late. But it built one breadcrumb at a time. By January, I had Jared combing through our finances. By March, Rachel had drafted the paperwork. By April, Miles was back in my life watching from the shadows. And now in June, Tessa had finally made her move. She thought she'd won. The waitress came back, refilled my cup without a word. I nodded my thanks. The booth was quiet, the lights soft, the rain steady. I checked my watch. Miles should be nearby by now. We'd timed it to the minute. I sipped my coffee and waited. I didn't need to call anyone, I didn't need help. I just needed her to believe she'd gotten away with it. Outside, a pair of headlights turned into the lot, cutting through the mist. A black SUV rolled to a slow stop. I didn't move right away. Just watched it through the foggy glass, felt the heat from the coffee seep into my hands. Then I stood up, tossed a few dollars on the table, and stepped back out into the rain. Miles rolled down the window. "You ready?" I nodded. "She thinks this was her idea," I said. Miles smirked. "That's the best part." I climbed in, shut the door, and the SUV pulled away back into the night. She'd left me in the rain, but I wasn't broken. I was just getting started. It started one Tuesday evening in late November. Tessa had come home from her supposed Pilates class an hour late. Hair damp, makeup smudged just enough to raise suspicion if I had been the kind of man to ask questions. I wasn't, at least not out loud. She kissed my cheek with that mechanical affection, dropped her gym bag by the door, and headed straight for the shower. I remember the scent of unfamiliar cologne lingering in the hallway as the steam filled our bedroom. Something had shifted, I could feel it. I didn't confront her, I watched, I listened. For the next 2 weeks, I noticed her screen time was longer, her texting more secretive. Her laughter became sudden and private. She started using terms like personal boundaries and energy protection, things she had never cared about before. That's when I decided to dig deeper. I had an old recorder from a client case a few years back. One of those tiny voice-activated devices that could fit inside a light socket. I slipped it behind the bookshelf in our home office. Tessa rarely used the office, or so I thought, until I caught her on the recorder taking long calls when she thought I was asleep or out running errands. I heard names I didn't recognize. I heard her mention transfers and account numbers. But it was the numbers that pushed me from suspicion to action. Our joint investment account was something I monitored monthly. Mostly index funds, nothing flashy, just long-term security. One night while checking in on our portfolio, I noticed that a position in a real estate fund had been liquidated. $45,000 gone. I triple-checked the logs. The account had been accessed on a Tuesday at 3:14 p.m. I was in a board meeting all afternoon. Only Tessa had access. I didn't mention it. Instead, I took screenshots, saved PDFs, and backed them up in 3 different places. I started creating folders labeled under innocent names, taxes, receipts, birthdays. Inside those folders were timelines, voice clips, transaction records, and more. I stopped sleeping well. My mind was a circuit board, every connection humming with suspicion. But outwardly, I kept my face blank calm. I brought her coffee in bed, I asked about her mother, I kissed her forehead when she left for brunches I knew she wasn't attending. If I looked broken, she'd get cautious. I needed her to believe I was still naive. By mid-December, she had changed her locks on her personal phone and stopped leaving her laptop open. But by then, I had already installed monitoring software with the help of a quiet favor from a friend in cybersecurity. Every file, every message, every call log came through to me in a silent stream. One evening, she made an offhand comment over dinner that I was getting boring, predictable, that I lacked ambition. I smiled and nodded and passed her the salt. I thanked her for her honesty. That night, I archived another 27 messages between her and someone named D. The messages were mostly code, but some weren't. If he finds out, it'll be over. He never will. He's not even looking. We'll get the house in Asheville once the money clears, just a little longer. I started to take walks alone, pretending to be clearing my head. In reality, I was meeting with Jared Wilson, an old college buddy turned CPA who owed me more than a few favors. Jared looked over the financials I brought and whistled low. There were more withdrawals than I'd caught routed through a series of shell accounts in names I didn't recognize. All of them led back to one source, a marketing firm in Charleston that Tessa had invested in 6 months prior. A firm that didn't have a website or even a real address. D had a full name now. Derek Lambert. Divorced twice, once bankrupt, and recently accused of investment fraud, though nothing had stuck. He was charming, articulate, and ran a fake business. He was the kind of man Tessa used to warn me about when we were younger. I asked Jared to keep going, quietly. I paid him in cash, used burner emails. I didn't want Tessa catching even the scent of what I was doing. She had gotten sloppy but not stupid. By Christmas, she was making excuses not to attend family events. She spent most of her time in what she called soul workshops, sometimes out of town, sometimes on Zoom with a curtain drawn behind her. She left her wedding ring on the bathroom counter more often. I started documenting everything with dates and timestamps. There was a day just after New Year's when she returned from one of her trips and sat across from me at breakfast, eyes bright with false joy. She told me she was working on herself and hoped I'd do the same. I nodded again, poured her orange juice, and asked if she wanted me to pick up groceries later. I wasn't interested in revenge. Not yet. I wanted truth. I wanted clarity. And I wanted options. That was when I reached out to Rachel Lynn, a lawyer recommended by another former client. Rachel specialized in high-asset divorce cases, especially those involving financial manipulation. I brought her everything. She said it was more than enough for an investigation and possibly criminal charges. She also said something else. You can't let her know you know. Not yet. The moment she suspects, she'll cover her tracks. So I played my part. I let myself be mocked, ignored, disrespected. I let her tell her friends that I was distant. I even let her cry once about how she felt trapped, all while texting Derek under the table. One morning, I walked into our shared home office and found her deleting files from the desktop. She jumped when she saw me, said it was just clutter. I nodded, kissed her cheek, and made a note of the time. I pulled the recovery logs later that night and restored everything. By February, she had begun to set the stage for a clean exit. She met with a real estate agent under a fake name. I had the recordings. She spoke with a lawyer downtown and asked about spousal support. I had the transcripts. She told Derek she just needed to trigger a fight, a public meltdown, so she could file for separation with grounds. I had the plan word for word, and still I waited. Because I wasn't done collecting. I wasn't just gathering evidence, I was building a map. A path from where I was to where I needed to be. And every step had to be flawless. Tessa thought I was predictable. She had no idea. Jared called me 3 days after I handed him the latest files. His voice was lower than usual, like he didn't want someone in his office overhearing. We need to talk, he said. I met him at a diner off Route 276, halfway between Greenville and Traveler's Rest. We used to come here during college breaks when we were both broke and hungover. The booths were still cracked, the pancakes still greasy, and the coffee still terrible. Jared slid into the seat across from me, dropped a flash drive on the table, and nodded at the waitress when she came by. "Just coffee," he said, "same for me." "You've been right to be suspicious," he started. "I tracked the funds from the joint investment account. That first transfer, you noticed the 45 grand, it didn't go to any of your existing portfolios. It got rerouted through 3 shell companies before landing in an LLC registered in Charleston. Name of the company, New Wave Creative Group. Supposedly a boutique ad agency. But there's no staff, no website, no active clients, and no tax filings since 2021. And who owns it?" He slid a piece of paper toward me with a name printed in bold at the top. Derek Vaughn. The name hit like a punch to the chest. I had seen it once before briefly in a message Tessa had deleted but was too slow to wipe from her backup cloud. I hadn't made the connection then. Now it was staring at me in black and white. Jared kept talking. He was flagged in a 2020 IRS investigation for tax evasion and fraudulent deduction claims through a now-defunct media firm. Charges were dropped due to lack of evidence. Since then, he's been flying under the radar. Keeps everything in other people's names, opens and closes companies like soda cans. And guess what? What your wife is listed as a consultant on the LLC. Not by name, though. Initials, TM, same as her old maiden name. That explained the money. It wasn't being stolen in chunks. It was being laundered disguised as payments for services she was supposedly providing to a ghost company owned by her boyfriend. Jared took a long sip of his coffee and sighed. There's more. He's not just draining money. He's also been making quiet moves to acquire your real estate holdings. 2 inquiries to agents about the lake house in Arden, 1 to your property manager in Wilmington, all from burner numbers linked to his company. I felt heat rising in my chest, not anger, not yet, just cold, focused clarity. "You think they're planning to flip everything before she files?" I asked. "Wouldn't be the first time. He's done it before with someone else. Same pattern. Seduces them, convinces them their spouse is dead weight, builds a fake business, funnels cash, vanishes when the divorce gets messy. Leaves them broke and holding the bag. She picked a real winner." Jared leaned back. "So what's your move, same as before? Keep quiet, keep watching." Jared nodded, pocketed his flash drive, and stood to leave. "Just don't wait too long," he said. "Guys like Derek don't play fair." I left the diner and sat in my truck for a long while, watching the rain start up again, tapping against the windshield like fingers tapping out a countdown. Derek Vaughn had a face now, a history, a method. I didn't need to guess anymore. I just needed to stay one step ahead. That night, Tessa came home late again. She tossed her keys on the counter, grabbed a bottle of wine, and kicked off her shoes like nothing in the world could touch her. I asked how her day was. She said she'd had a breakthrough in therapy, something about realizing her personal truth. I listened, nodded, smiled. I told her I was proud of her. She didn't know I had just seen footage from earlier that afternoon of her meeting Derek at a Starbucks 2 towns over. He touched her back. She touched his wrist. Their body language screamed intimacy. She looked happier in that grainy footage than I'd seen her in years. I saved it, dated it, filed it. Over the next 2 weeks, the pattern repeated. Derek was everywhere and nowhere. He never showed up at our house. He didn't call the home phone, but his digital fingerprints were all over Tessa's financial life. I traced wire transfers, Dropbox folders, fake invoices, and Zoom meetings with clients that didn't exist. She was building a case for income, as if preparing to claim she had been the breadwinner, as if to justify demanding alimony. Rachel, my lawyer, confirmed it. She's constructing a paper trail, she told me. If we let it play out, It strengthens our side, shows premeditation, shows fraud, so I let it play. I let her think she was the clever one. She booked a spa weekend in Savannah. I smiled and told her to enjoy herself. She said she needed space to journal and reconnect with her inner self. I said I understood. She packed silk pajamas and left her wedding ring behind again. I called Miles that weekend. We hadn't talked in years. He had left law enforcement after a burnout and worked private now. Security surveillance protection. He didn't ask questions when I told him the situation. Just said, "Tell me where to start." He started watching Derek, quietly. Took pictures, recorded patterns, found out Derek had a second girlfriend in Atlanta, possibly a third in Charleston. Tessa wasn't the only one getting played. She was just the only one putting her marriage on the line. I started sleeping again, oddly enough. Knowing more made the weight easier to carry. There was no more guessing, only steps, plans, outcomes. Tessa came home from Savannah glowing, said she'd had a spiritual reset. She kissed my cheek longer that time, poured me wine, said she had a surprise for me coming soon. I pretended to be curious. She didn't notice the camera I'd mounted in the hallway light fixture or the audio bug in her office pen holder. That night, while she showered, I listened to a voice memo she'd recorded to Derek. "He doesn't suspect a thing. I'll get him to snap soon, then I'll have everything I need. Just hang tight, baby." I deleted the file from her phone after saving it in my private archive. She was building her trap. She didn't know mine had already closed around her. Miles showed up at my office 2 days after our call. He hadn't changed much since college. A little broader in the shoulders, a few more lines around the eyes, but the same steady presence I remembered. He wore a dark jacket, jeans, and that old Navy cap he used to toss on during exam weeks. When he walked in, I didn't need to say anything. He just nodded, closed the door behind him, and sat down across from me like he'd been waiting for this conversation for years. "So how bad is it?" he asked. "Bad enough I need someone I trust watching my back." He didn't flinch. He pulled out a small notebook from his coat and flipped it open. "Give me names, places, dates. Let's build a file." For the next hour, I laid it all out. Tessa, Derek, the shell companies, the financial drains, the lies, the recordings. He didn't interrupt once, just scribbled down everything, occasionally asking for a clarification or a timestamp. When I finished, he closed the notebook slowly. "I'll start surveillance on Derek and Tessa both. Track their movements. Flag anything unusual. But I'm not just going to watch. I'm going to keep you safe. You sure she's not dangerous, no? But I'm sure she's desperate." He leaned back. "Desperate people do stupid things. We'll stay ahead of it." That night, I gave him access to the camera feed's voice logs and the cloud storage I'd been compiling. He was impressed by the amount of documentation. "You always did your homework," he said. I didn't laugh. None of this felt clever. It just felt necessary. The next day, I met Rachel Lynn again at her office in downtown Asheville. It was a minimalist space, all clean lines and glass panels. But the way she worked was far from cold. She was sharp, efficient, and had the kind of calm that made people talk more than they meant to. I handed her the newest batch of evidence. She spent the next 45 minutes scrolling through files, nodding occasionally, murmuring legal terms under her breath. "You said she's been moving assets?" she finally asked. "Yes, but I don't have all the paperwork." Rachel tapped her keyboard, pulled up a document from her legal database, and frowned. "You signed a power of attorney for her in 2021, right? To handle the cabin renovation while you were overseas, yeah. I was consulting in Zurich for 3 months. She said she needed it to pay contractors and handle permits. Well, she used that document again. Multiple times. Without informing you. She executed a transfer of partial ownership of the Arden Lake House to a trust you're not listed on. Also, she liquidated a brokerage account under the same authority. I felt the blood drain from my face. Is that even legal? It's murky. Technically, if the power of attorney is still active, she didn't break the law. But morally and financially, it's absolutely abuse of authority. We can contest it, especially with proof she misled you. Did you ever revoke the document? No. I didn't think to. Rachel shook her head. Most people forget. It's a time bomb if it lands in the wrong hands. Good news is we can act on it, but we need to freeze some accounts immediately before she drains more. She drafted the paperwork that afternoon. I signed everything. Emergency motions to freeze transfers, notifications to financial institutions, notices of pending investigation. She also filed preliminary disclosures for potential fraud related to marital assets. It was moving fast, but not fast enough to tip Tessa off. We kept everything quiet, sealed, and under temporary review status. Later that week, Miles sent me photos. Tessa and Derek were meeting more frequently. Hotel bars, private office spaces, once even a yoga retreat center that supposedly held weekend seminars on spiritual alignment. Derek played the guru role well. Clean-shaven, too-polished suits, the kind of charm that made people lean in too close. But Miles caught something interesting. On 2 occasions, Derek left meetings and drove straight to a rundown building on the east side of Columbia. It looked abandoned, but through binoculars, Miles spotted interior lights and movement. He suspected Derek was using the place as a data drop or document stash. We planned to dig into it, but not just yet. Timing was critical. Too soon and they'd scatter. Too late and the money might be unrecoverable. At home, Tessa was changing too. Her smiles were sharper. She started rearranging rooms, putting her name on mailboxes, making subtle digs about ownership. She asked questions like, "Do you ever think about downsizing?" or "Maybe it's time we restructured our finances." I let her talk. I let her believe. On a Sunday morning, while she was out for brunch with her book club, I found an envelope in her desk drawer. It wasn't hidden, almost like she wanted me to find it. Inside were real estate listings, all cash purchases, all in Derek's name. She had circled one with a red pen. A condo near Savannah. Waterfront view. Gated. Private elevator access. I scanned it, filed it, took a photo, put it back exactly where I found it. Rachel was right. She was preparing her exit. That evening, I stood on the back porch watching the storm roll in across the Blue Ridge foothills. Miles texted me from his parked SUV a few blocks away. Tessa was home. Derek wasn't with her. I typed one line back. Keep watching. Because I had just learned something new. Tessa had scheduled a private appointment with a notary for the following Thursday. The same day she had asked me to fly to a supposed investors summit in Miami. Alone. She was planning something. And whatever it was, she didn't plan on me coming back. Logan hadn't returned any of my messages in months. Last time we'd spoken in person was a birthday dinner nearly a year ago, and even then he left before dessert. His tone had been flat, his questions short, and his eyes full of judgment. I couldn't blame him. His version of the story had always painted me as the villain who tore the family apart. But now I needed him to see the truth, or at least part of it. I drove to Davidson College on a Tuesday afternoon. The air was thick with early spring pollen, the kind that coated every surface in yellow dust. Students rode bikes across campus, sprawled out on lawns, earbuds in, oblivious to anything beyond midterms and Instagram. Logan was waiting outside the student union, hoodie pulled over his head despite the warm sun, arms crossed like he was already ready to leave. I parked, grabbed the envelope I'd prepared, just a few documents. No accusations, and walked toward him. "Hey," he nodded, no smile, just a nod. "Dad, you look good." "I look tired," he replied. "College'll do that." We stood in silence for a few seconds. I motioned toward the bench and he sat. His body turned slightly away from mine. He was taller than I remembered, broad-shouldered now. His mother's chin, but my eyes. I didn't come here to make this weird, I said. Too late. I took a breath, tried to keep my voice steady. There's some stuff happening. With Tessa. I didn't want you to hear it from someone else first. He scoffed. So it's true then, Mom said she was acting weird, thought it was midlife drama or whatever. It's more than that. He looked at me now finally. Just a glance. Not full eye contact, but close enough. Is she cheating? I paused, long enough for him to read the answer before I gave it. Yes, he nodded, jaw clenched. With someone from work? Not exactly. Another pause. And you knew? For a while. And you didn't say anything. It's complicated, I'm handling it. He stared out toward the quad. A group of girls laughed near the fountain, their carefree voices a sharp contrast to the silence between us. So what you want me to feel sorry for you, no. I just want you to know the truth, and maybe understand that I wasn't always the monster you thought I was. He shifted, pulling his sleeves over his hands. You weren't there when Mom needed you. You left us. You married someone 10 years younger. You never looked back. I did look back, every day. I just didn't know how to fix what I broke. He didn't answer. I handed him the envelope. No fanfare. Just set it on the bench between us. What's this? Just information, if you ever want to know more. He didn't touch it. I stood up. Look, Logan, I'm not here to force anything. I'm not asking for your loyalty. Just, if anything weird happens in the next few weeks, I want you to be safe. Be careful who you trust. He looked up now, something flickering in his expression. Is she dangerous? Not physically, but she's reckless, and reckless people hurt others without meaning to. He nodded once. Before I could walk away, he said it, quiet like it had been sitting in his throat for a while. Did she ever love you? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. As I walked back to the car, I saw him pick up the envelope. He didn't open it right away, but he held it like something fragile. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something. And for now, that was enough. The envelope was barely cold in Logan's hands when Tessa made her first official move, early May. A Thursday morning, I came home from a run to find a thick packet slid under the front door. It was from her attorney, addressed to me, formally Daniel R. Grayson, as if we hadn't shared a bed for 6 years. Inside was a petition for divorce full of carefully crafted lies and weaponized half-truths. She accused me of financial control, emotional withholding, manipulative behavior. She painted herself as the trapped wife with no access to funds, no voice in the marriage, no life of her own. It was a strategy, classic smear campaign designed to earn sympathy from the court, confuse public perception, and frame herself as the victim before I had a chance to speak. I sat at the kitchen table reading the whole thing while she watered the plants outside like it was any other morning. When she came in, she didn't even look at me. You saw the papers, I assume. I nodded. It's for the best, she said almost casually. Sure. She blinked, surprised I didn't fight, that I didn't yell, that I didn't beg, but that was the point. Let her think she was in control. Later that afternoon, I called Rachel and scanned the documents to her. She read them while I stayed on the line, silent. She's making bold claims, Rachel said, not untypical. The language is designed to provoke. Do not respond yet. Let her think she has the upper hand. What she didn't know was that I had already seen her next play. 2 days earlier, Bridget, one of the accountants in my firm, had flagged something odd. A batch of invoices with vague service descriptions linked to a company called Indigo Group. Supposedly, they had provided consulting for our digital rebranding. But there had been no such project, and the approval signature on the payment release was forged, sloppily. Tessa's handwriting copied poorly. Bridget forwarded the files to Jared, who traced the vendor account. Within 24 hours, he confirmed it Indigo Group was a shell company. The bank routing numbers matched one of the aliases Derek used in Charleston. The amount scheduled for final transfer was $250,000. Set to clear the following Wednesday. That night I met with Rachel and Miles in a corner booth at a diner off Route 74. We kept it low profile. Miles wore a baseball cap, Rachel her usual sleek blazer with no jewelry. I laid out the timeline. Miles had photos of Derek and Tessa's recent meetups, complete with timestamps and GPS logs. "She's rushing," Rachel noted, "probably because she thinks she's winning." "She's overconfident," I said, "which makes her sloppy," Miles added. Rachel pulled out her laptop. "I want to file for a temporary injunction tonight. Emergency freeze on all jointly held assets, including any business accounts she accessed using her power of attorney." She still thinks I haven't revoked it. Then let her keep thinking that, Rachel said. "We'll file the revocation after the freeze. By then she'll have already triggered the violation." Within hours, the paperwork was filed. Court clerks in Mecklenburg County moved fast that night. By morning, the order was signed. Any attempt to move joint assets would trigger alerts and immediate blocks. Jared set up watchdogs across every linked account. We weren't just reacting anymore, we were trapping her in the mess she made. At home, I played the part. Tessa made a show of being generous. She cooked dinner. She asked about Logan, pretending to care. She brought up mediation, pretending she wanted peace. She even mentioned a wellness retreat she was planning in Sedona, a clear alibi for her next move. I let her talk, and I watched. Every time she logged into her laptop, I logged it too. Every document printed, every call placed to her attorney, every spreadsheet she tried to hide under file names like garden budget or yoga retreat schedule. I had it all. Then came Monday morning. Bridget walked into my office, shut the door behind her, and placed another folder on my desk. "There's more," she said. She tried to route money through an inactive sub-account. The approvals bounced, but I flagged it just in case. Inside were 3 invoices, all identical, all signed with the same poor forgery. The dates were backdated, the project codes didn't exist, and the amounts matched payments Tessa had mentioned on the phone with Derek. I looked up at Bridget. "How long have you known a week?" I wasn't sure, but I've been watching her. She made a call from the break room yesterday, forgot to hang up. I heard everything. "You didn't have to do this," I said. She smiled, a little sad. "Yeah, I did. I scanned and sent everything to Rachel, who called within minutes. We have more than enough now. I'll file for contempt of marital asset protection, and once we reveal the forged documents, we can push for criminal charges." "Do it quietly," I said. "I don't want her running yet." "She won't," Rachel replied. "She thinks she's already won." And she did. Tessa moved through the house like a queen, smiling, triumphant, planning spa weekends and speaking engagements about women reclaiming their power. She even bought a new car, paid in cash. She didn't know every dollar was being tracked. She didn't know Rachel had already contacted the DA. She didn't know the walls were closing in. And she certainly didn't know that I was watching her pack bags. She'd never get to carry. The forecast called for heavy rain. Thunderstorms rolling in from the west, set to hit just after sunset. It was exactly what I needed. I sent Miles the message at noon, green light. He replied with a single word, "Ready." I had spent the last 3 days turning up the heat slowly. Short answers, questions about money, comments that made Tessa squirm just enough to trigger her reflex to dominate. The final nudge came that morning over coffee when I casually asked about the missing quarterly report from the business account. she snapped. "You're unbelievable," she said, slamming her mug on the counter. "Accusing me again. Of course. You never change." I said nothing, just stared. She stormed out, then came back 5 minutes later, calmer, lips curled into that familiar, calculated smile. "Let's take a drive," she said. "Clear the air." That was it. The cue. I nodded and grabbed my jacket. The sky was already a deep gray wind picking up in swirls. We got into her SUV, the one she bought, with my name still on the title, and headed north toward the state highway. She took the exit for Route 221. Miles had suggested the gas station just past the old truck stop. Isolated, no cameras, barely lit. We drove in silence for most of the ride. I kept my eyes on the dashboard, watched the clock tick down. When she turned off onto the narrow service road, I knew we were close. Rain started tapping the windshield, first gentle, then harder. The wipers slapped in rhythm. Tessa's jaw tightened. Her hands gripped the wheel like she was holding back something violent. "You think I'm stupid, don't you?" she said, breaking the silence. "No. You think I don't know what you've been doing? Asking around, digging, pretending to be innocent." I stayed quiet. "Well, here's the truth. I'm done. I've outgrown you. You don't scare me anymore." We pulled into the lot by the closed diner, now barely visible under the sheets of rain. She put the car in park but kept the engine running. "Get out," she said. "What? Get out?" I looked at her calm. She wouldn't make eye contact. "I'm not doing this, Tessa." "Yes, you are. You wanted to talk. Let's talk. Outside. Like adults." She knew I wouldn't argue. That was part of her pattern. Draw me into her terrain, get the upper hand, then deliver the blow. I opened the door and stepped into the rain. It was cold, the kind of rain that soaked through your clothes in seconds. I turned back to face her, but she was already putting the car in drive. The window slid down just enough. "You brought this on yourself," she said. "You never deserved any of it." Then she hit the gas. The SUV sprayed water as it peeled off tires, squealing in the mud taillights, disappearing into the storm. I stood there, drenched, breathing slow. The plan had worked. She thought she had humiliated me. She thought she had finished me. I checked my watch. 10 seconds, headlights flickered down the road. A black Range Rover pulled up beside me. The window lowered. "Need a ride?" Miles grinned. I climbed in without a word. He handed me a towel. "You good, perfect," I said. We drove off, staying a few minutes behind Tessa's route. I watched the rain streak down the window, every drop another piece of her undoing falling into place. The gas station footage was already on a secure server. Miles's dash cam had caught everything. Rachel was waiting with the documentation. She made her move. Now it was my turn. Miles turned up the heat, not in the car, but in the atmosphere. The Range Rover's interior glowed dimly as he tapped the tablet mounted on the dash, loading the folder we'd both been waiting for. The screen lit up with a grid of files, each labeled neatly each time. Stamped, each an arrow aimed straight at Tessa's armor. He handed it to me without a word. The first was a PDF of account transfers. Over 20 entries, funds withdrawn in small amounts laundered through dummy vendors and routed to 2 offshore accounts linked to the Caymans. One had been opened under a shell company registered to Derek Vaughn's mother's maiden name. Sloppy. I scrolled to the audio files. Miles had bugged Tessa's phone weeks ago, a temporary patch piggybacked on a Bluetooth sync she didn't realize had auto-connected to his monitoring hub. One clip stood out. She was talking to Derek in a hotel room. The sound of glasses clinking, sheets rustling. Her voice low. "It'll all be over soon. Once the money clears, I'll ghost him. He won't even see it coming." Derek laughed. "You sure he doesn't suspect?" Tessa whispered. "Daniel's a fossil. He still uses folders for taxes. Please. I didn't blink, didn't flinch, just hit pause and moved on. There were screenshots next. Emails confirming wire authorizations approvals from my forged signature captured from her laptop via a remote desktop access Jared had slipped in when he serviced the home office router last month. Another file. A series of nighttime photos, Tessa and Derek in Charleston stepping out of a boutique hotel arms linked. Her wearing a scarf I bought her for our anniversary. Miles kept his eyes on the road. You all right? I nodded slowly, just tired of playing nice. His phone pinged. Elliot. Rachel's got the packet from Elliot, Miles said. She's loading it into the case file now. I took out my own phone, opened the encrypted app Rachel had us use for sensitive communication. The report was waiting. 78 pages. Elliot had traced every misuse of the power of attorney I'd signed back in 2021. Real estate holdings funneled into a trust I never authorized. Vehicle titles switched under my nose. A business investment dissolved and replaced by one solely under Tessa's name. She tried to erase me in slow motion. But now the tape was rewinding. I typed a single message to Rachel. Begin. She responded in under 10 seconds. Affidavits filed. DA's contact has been briefed. We'll freeze the personal accounts tonight. Civil suit prep in progress. Miles smirked. This is the part where she realizes the water's rising and there's no way out. I leaned back in the seat, watching the rain still pour outside, though it was softer now. Everything in motion, everything prepped, every move recorded, every lie cataloged. The paper trail she thought was invisible had become a net. You sure she doesn't suspect anything? Miles asked. She thinks I'm sitting at home crying. And Derek, he'll run, that's who he is. But he won't get far. The IRS is already watching him. We just gave them a reason to close in. We pulled off the highway, headed toward Rachel's office. The windows buzzed with white noise from the tires slicing through wet asphalt. I opened the last file. It was a scanned copy of the original power of attorney Tessa had used. Next to it, Elliot's forensic breakdown showing every single mismatch in dates, initials, digital timestamps. She didn't even notice the log errors, I muttered. Because she never thought you'd fight back. Miles replied. The office building was dark except for Rachel's window on the 3rd floor. We took the back stairwell. Inside, she was already standing by the war board full of photos. Sticky notes, court dates, and diagrams like something out of a spy movie. Her eyes lit up when she saw us. We have everything, she said. Grand jury will have no problem understanding this. This isn't just fraud. This is premeditated asset concealment with intent to defraud during divorce proceedings. What's the timeline? We present the evidence to Judge Lawrence at 9 a.m. tomorrow. If he agrees, the freeze becomes permanent. After that, we let her legal team squirm. Then we move for full asset recovery and criminal referral. And if she tries to run, Miles pulled out a GPS tracker. She won't get far. I looked out the window into the city below. Somewhere out there, Tessa was pouring a drink, smiling in victory, thinking she had won. She had no idea the floor was already gone beneath her feet. The knock at the door came just after lunch. I wasn't expecting anyone. Rachel was in court. Miles was off-grid running recon, and I hadn't told anyone else where I'd be that day. I opened the door and found Logan standing there, shoulders damp from the light rain backpack slung over one shoulder. Expression unreadable. "Hey," he said simply. "Hey, can I come in?" I stepped aside without a word. He walked in like it wasn't the first time in months, like we hadn't gone years, barely speaking. He dropped the bag by the couch and looked around. "Place looks the same." I nodded. "Except quieter." I half smiled. "Want something to drink? Water's fine." I poured him a glass and handed it over. He sat down, looked up at me, and then finally spoke. "I got your message about Mom, about everything." I took the armchair opposite him. "You deserve the full story," I said, and so I told him. Not the sanitized version, not just the headline facts. I gave him everything. The forged signatures, the offshore accounts, Derek, the betrayal that had been slow and precise, the trap I'd set, the move she thought was her victory. He didn't interrupt, not once. Just sat there, hands folded, eyes locked on me like he was trying to see a man he hadn't believed in for a long time. When I was done, the room felt heavier. The silence between us wasn't empty. It was full of years we hadn't spoken, misunderstandings that had calcified into resentment. Logan finally leaned back, exhaling. "I was wrong about you," he said. "About a lot of things." I didn't respond. "I always thought you left Mom because you were selfish, that you cared more about work than us. But she never said half of what you just did. She made you the villain, and I believed her. You were a kid. That wasn't on you." "Maybe not, but I'm not a kid now, and I should have asked, should have looked closer." He reached into his bag and pulled out a thin blue folder. "I want to help." Rachel's expecting this, right? I looked at the folder. Inside were the updated affidavits, asset logs, and the digital trail from Jared's recent analysis. Rachel had asked for someone she trusted to hand-deliver it since there had been attempts to intercept our email traffic. "I was going to send Miles," I said. "Let me," Logan replied. "I owe you. You don't owe me anything." "I do, for not showing up sooner." He stood. I stood too. And for a second I saw my son not as the angry boy who'd walked away years ago, but as a man who'd finally seen what he hadn't wanted to believe. We shook hands. It was the first time in nearly a decade. "She's not going to stop," I told him. "I know," he said, "but neither are we." I watched from the porch as he drove off, the folder on the passenger seat beside him. I trusted him to get it there, not just because Rachel needed it, but because he did, for his own reckoning, for his own redemption. Inside, my phone buzzed. A message from Rachel. Court date confirmed. Tessa has 48 hours to respond. I looked out at the clearing sky. The storm was finally starting to lift. But I knew better. The real one was just about to begin. The courthouse was colder than I remembered. Polished stone floors, echoes of heels and briefcases, the scent of coffee mixed with stress. Rachel moved like she owned the place, heels clicking with purpose, eyes straight ahead. Logan and I followed behind her. None of us spoke. We didn't need to. The folder in her hands spoke loud enough. By the time we entered Judge Lawrence's chambers, the air had already shifted. He was known for one thing: no patience for liars. Rachel placed the folder on his desk, nodded once, then sat down. She began with the power of attorney, explained how it had been forged, showed the forensic analysis from Elliot, time-stamped discrepancies, IP addresses from Tessa's devices. Then came the financial records flagged by Jared and Bridget. A trail of misappropriated funds, assets hidden in shell entities, offshore movement traced back to Derek Vaughn. And finally, the personal. Audio recordings, photographs, affidavits. Enough to make any judge see past the polished exterior Tessa had built for herself. Judge Lawrence flipped through each section in silence. When he finished, he closed the folder and looked up. "I assume you're requesting a temporary asset freeze pending investigation?" Rachel nodded. "Correct, Your Honor. And an immediate injunction against further financial activity by the defendant." "Granted," he said. "All personal and shared accounts will be frozen effective immediately. I'll also notify the DA's office. This may go beyond civil jurisdiction." As we left, Rachel's phone buzzed. She answered, expression neutral, then turned to me. "Derek's been picked up," State Financial Crimes Unit. They're questioning him now." "Good," I said. Later that afternoon, Bridget arrived at Rachel's office through the back entrance. She wore a scarf and dark glasses, nervous but determined. Rachel handed her the affidavit. Bridget read it silently, then signed without hesitation. "Are you sure?" Rachel asked. Bridget nodded. "I saw too much, and I stayed quiet too long. You'll be protected. Anonymous. We'll handle it." After she left, Rachel pulled out a fresh legal pad and made a note. "She's the linchpin." No one else on the inside had access to the files she saw. With her, it's airtight. That night, news broke in a quiet way. Not on television, not in headlines, but through whispers in legal circles. Tessa's lawyer, Philip Hartwell, filed a motion to withdraw from the case, citing ethical conflict and risk of professional liability. Translation: he knew she was guilty and didn't want to go down with her. The next morning, Rachel sent a courier to deliver the formal complaint to the Board of Realtors and the Financial Ethics Committee. By noon, Tessa's license to operate her boutique agency had been suspended. She called me that night. First time since she left me in the rain. "Why are you doing this?" I waited. Let the silence stretch. "You lied, you cheated, you stole, and you thought you'd walk away clean. You're destroying everything." "No, you did that. I'm just holding up a mirror." I hung up. By the end of the week, every one of her known accounts had been frozen. Real estate in escrow flagged, cars repossessed. She tried hiring a new lawyer. None would touch her. Derek was still in custody, singing to save himself. Rachel was calm, methodical, never gloating. "Now we wait for the court to schedule the full hearing," she said. But her leverage is gone. She's isolated. No allies, no resources, just time to think. Logan stopped by again. This time he brought takeout and a quiet smile. "She really underestimated you," he said. "People like her always do. They confuse silence with weakness." He raised his glass. "To justice." I clinked mine against his. "Not yet," I said, "but we're close." It started with a knock at Rachel's office. Miles opened the door before anyone else could move. Tessa stood there, makeup smudged, rain clinging to her jacket hair, a mess. She looked nothing like the polished woman who once ran fundraisers and sold million-dollar homes in uptown Charlotte. "I need to speak to Daniel," she said. Rachel stood up, calm as ever. "He's not available. I just want to talk. I want to withdraw the petition. We don't have to go to court." Miles stepped forward, his broad frame silently closing the space. "This isn't the place," he said. "I'm begging you." Miles didn't blink. "Turn around, Ms. Grayson. This office is no longer yours to walk into." Tessa's mouth trembled. Her shoulders sank. But when no one moved, she turned and left, heels scraping the wet pavement. Inside, Rachel looked at me. "She's unraveling." "Let her," I said. The next morning, I got a call from Jared. "Derek's gone. Pulled his bail money and vanished. No forwarding address, no phone, nothing. They think he fled to Costa Rica." Figures. Without Derek to pin it on, the investigators turned fully to Tessa. She became the face of the scheme. Her name was attached to every transfer, every document. The boutique agency she founded, clients pulled out. The board sent an emergency suspension notice. Her license was stripped. Real estate circles whispered, then stopped whispering. Her brand was radioactive. Logan called later that week. She came to campus. What tried to get me to speak on her behalf, said you manipulated her, said she was scared, and I told her the only person she should be afraid of is the judge she's going to face. I exhaled slowly. "Thanks." He paused. "She's not doing well. You can see it. But I don't feel sorry for her. You don't have to." Rachel filed the final set of motions on a Thursday. The hearing date was set. Tessa didn't file a response. No lawyer appeared on her behalf. She had no representation left. Miles sent me a photo that night. Tessa outside her old office, standing in the rain, staring through the glass. She looked hollow. Not angry, not plotting, just empty. I didn't feel triumph. No joy, just relief. She had tried to gut me slowly, piece by piece. She thought I'd break quietly, that I'd walk away ruined. But now she was the one standing alone. The assets were frozen. The court placed an injunction on the home. Creditors had started circling. She had nowhere left to go. And still I hadn't laid a finger on her. All I'd done was let the truth rise. Logan stopped by that weekend. We sat on the back porch. The sky was finally clear for once. He handed me a small envelope. "What's this?" "Something I wrote. A statement. For the hearing, just in case they ask about the family side of things." I read it. It wasn't long, but it was honest. Painful even. A son finally seeing both sides and choosing one. "You sure about this?" He nodded. "It's time people stop letting her get away with this." I folded the letter and placed it in my jacket pocket. "Thanks, kid," he smirked. "You can stop calling me kid now. I'm older than you were when you married her." Fair point. That night I looked over the case files again, not because I needed to, but because it was almost over. Everything I'd collected, every conversation recorded, every bank slip traced. It had taken months, years, really. But karma doesn't rush. It walks. And by the time it arrives, it doesn't knock. It lets itself in. The recorder clicked on with a soft hum. I sat in my study blinds, half drawn, the late autumn light filtering through with a kind of softness I hadn't felt in years. No suit today, no lawyer's calls, no court documents, just a blank audio file and the weight of everything I had lived. I took a breath. If you're hearing this, it's not because I needed anyone else to understand. It's because I needed to remind myself. 6 months. That's how long it's been since the storm ended, since the hearings, since the signatures were filed and the ink dried on the final decree, since the truth stopped being a burden and started becoming freedom. Tessa never showed up again after that last call. No apology, no explanation, just silence. Her accounts were seized, her agency dissolved. Derek was never found, but the courts deemed his testimony irrelevant. The evidence stood on its own. She lost everything she tried to steal, but I didn't win. This wasn't about winning. It was about something else, about drawing a line between what I endured and what I would never allow again. Logan moved in for a few months after the summer break. We rebuilt quietly, not through long talks or apologies, but through shared dinners. Laundry days, football games on the weekend. Sometimes healing doesn't come through words, just presence. Rachel's firm still sends updates from time to time, but they don't matter now. I keep the files in a locked cabinet, not because I need to look at them, but because they're a reminder of how far I let things go before I acted. I walk more now, along the greenway near Davidson. It's quiet there. No one knows who I am. No one looks at me like I'm the guy who got betrayed. I'm just a man in a sweatshirt with a coffee in hand and a second chance in his chest. Miles still checks in. He pretends it's casual. It never is. I think he's more relieved than I am. Not everyone gets to be the guy who catches you when you fall. He caught me twice, and Jared's still my accountant, still bad at golf. But he was one of the first people who reminded me that silence doesn't mean weakness. It can mean strategy. So what did I learn? That sometimes strength isn't loud. It doesn't always throw punches or raise its voice. Sometimes strength is quiet. It listens. It waits. It builds a case while the world thinks you've given up. I don't hate Tessa. I don't forgive her either. What I feel is something in between. Gratitude maybe for showing me the parts of myself I'd buried. The parts that remembered how to fight, how to hold ground, how to say no. Everything she tried to take from me I reclaimed, not to throw it in her face, but to prove to myself I could. I hit stop on the recorder, sat for a moment. The house didn't feel empty. It felt mine.